Well, hello, everyone. We are live now with the CEO panel. I'm seeing my mouth look like it's dubbing, so I'm not sure why that is. It's kind of strange. So hopefully that's not too distracting for you. Um, anyway, so I'm excited to have them on because I thought, they're part of the Leadership Heart community. Right now during COVID, we really need to have, really strong leaders who show a lot of compassion and who lead with heart. So I want to introduce them now. So first we have Don Davis. Hello there, Don.
Hello. Good
Don is
morning.
the county manager for Jefferson County here in Colorado, and he's also former military, and he's got like a very impressive history in the military and being there for our country. So thank you for that. I want to make sure I mention that. Next up is Jim Reuter. He is the president and CEO of First Bank here in Colorado. One of my very favorite leaders, in fact, one of my very favorite podcast episodes. I have some top ones, and his is there. And so when you make sure that you go seek them out because they are on there. And what I might do is when I share it, I will post it with their podcast episodes, and then you can go check out those episodes as well. And next we have Joann Robertson, and believe me, it is not like last but not least. She is not least. She is amazing. I remember talking to her on my show. It's amazing how I can think about the episodes and think this through the specific conversations. And just recently, as I'm writing this book that has all of these leaders in it as well, I'm remembering these conversations and so vividly, and it makes the hair stand up on my arm. I'm a little geeky about leadership, so I'm just excited to have all of you here, and hopefully whoever's out there joining, because I can't really see who's out there right now. So whoever's joining us, please do let us know where you're joining us from, and just say hey, and we'll make sure to play inside the comments a little bit today. So, all right, well, yay, we're all here. The first of 3 of the series, and I decided to do this again because I wanted to bring some leaders that show both strength and compassion. The ones that have what we call both the hard and the soft side right in line, and they keep their organizations at the focus, and their people are right in the front, but they do achieve things, by the way. There's a lot of goals and things that they achieve. So what I want to talk about now, and I'll just kind of ask one, and you can just kind of go around a round table, is what right now, there's obviously a lot of challenges. All of your organizations are facing challenges. I am, all businesses are. And what are some of those things? Are there some stories that you'd like to share? Something that maybe happened where you felt like you were kind of presented at a crossroads in leadership, and you had to go down this one route, and it's right now during COVID when people are hurting. I just love to know if you've thought about any of that, and if you'd like to share. And whoever wants to go first, if you right off want to do it. Otherwise, I'll just call on you.
Well, I'll go ahead and go first if my other colleagues don't mind. Heather, I appreciate your interest in leadership, and in particular caring, thoughtful, engaged leadership from the heart. I think it's important, and it leads into what we're doing as leaders today. First and foremost, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And along those lines, good leaders have a leadership philosophy. They live it, and they share it with others, and they do it in such a way that they can build trust. And they do it. You got to be a leader. If you're going to be a leader during a crisis, you have to be a leader before the crisis, because you got to build trust. You got to build confidence. And when you're going through the crisis, you're going to be able to lean on that trust and confidence of your employees, and really inspire them. As a Marine for 27 years, you have to have both sides. There are times when you have to make really tough calls that could be life and death. Or choosing between death or more death. And, fortunately, I'm not in that business anymore, but I am in the county manager business. I have over 3,000 employees. We've got 600,000 citizens that we're supporting. And it's a pretty tough thing, especially when you're dealing with COVID and emotions run high, where you've got the merging of government and public health. And so there's this conflict between the economy and between those folks who are responsible for providing their best medical recommendation. For us, it's mission first, people always. The primary purpose of local government and government in general is to provide for the safety and security of the people. And so we must accomplish our mission. We don't have a choice. We've got to get it done, but we can never forget that it's with people, for people, and by people. And of course, I think one of the things that's important while you're going through the crisis, in particular for me, is communication and feedback. We actually use the Gallup employee question poll that Gallup actually, they usually never let you do anything for free or use any of their surveys, but they do have a quick, I think it's 5 questions employee survey that we've been using to get feedback to communicate with our employees. Later today, I'll have an employee town hall meeting. I've had a few of those. And we have about 1,000 of our employees last town hall show up. So it's a great opportunity to interact and to lead them and to hear what their concerns are, which is key during a crisis. You got to communicate. Every week I'll do a manager minutes, which is like 2 or 3 minute video, or share with the employees what we're doing, how we're trying to make them safe, how we're working. And then we'll throw out some newsletters and so forth. I think most importantly, too, through all this, they need to know that you can keep your composure, that you remain calm. I think of course, it's easier for me because now that I'm no longer, in the Marine Corps, I'm not getting shot at or anything like that. I mean, yeah, I guess there's some figurative bullets that come our way, but there's no literal bullets flying, and so. I think staying calm and keeping your sense of humor for sure. So that's what I would say for introductory comments, especially for the crisis. And we can talk about some specific events later on as the other two, my 2 colleagues share what they're doing from their end.
Awesome. Who wants to go next?
Well, sure, I'll jump in. I mean, I think for me, what's been really interesting and challenging is I'm the mum of 2 small children. So my little boy's about to turn 4 and my little girl's about to turn 1. And I think the combination of, this crisis was, so sudden in many regards, the kind of move to permanently have all our employees working from home at the same time as having our children permanently at home was a huge personal challenge for me. My husband and I both working full time and having 2 tiny children who can't necessarily entertain or look after themselves at home. And many of my employees were in the exact same situation. And so those first few weeks of kind of being a permanent parent, a permanent CEO, and also a permanent housekeeper, you forget that when you're in these big leadership jobs, you have a whole support network that keeps your ecosystem moving and going. The personal pressure was and continues to be, in all honesty, we still have the children at home 12 weeks later, is intense, and being able to juggle every single day the balance of your work commitments, your commitment to your people, and all the things that Dawn just said about showing that resilience, showing optimism, being caring, keeping the business, moving forward, at the same time as keeping, your home life intact. And it's been a really fascinating thing for me. I just saw today, Forbes had put out some data that in the UK, women with children are 47% more likely to have lost their job since the start of this crisis than men with children. And so as a young female leader, I find that really shocking that in 2020, it is still the women in society who are shouldering the majority of child and home care, and that women's careers are so impacted by a crisis like this, it will have a long-term lasting effect. And so my commitment to really being a champion for women in leadership, women in business, and the rebalancing in society, whilst these last 12 weeks have been intense, insane, have taken me to the edge at many points, I feel really good about the choices that I've made in my life, and the fact that I have a husband and a partner who truly is a partner, and we've had that burden shared between us over that time. And I think it's something worth remembering as leaders, that we're not all equal in the workplace, and that during this crisis and post this crisis, there will be many people impacted much more severely than others.
Ooh, that was awesome. Thank you. That's a good lens, I think, to present. Okay, before I go on, I just want to make sure I recognize those that are showing up to say hello to us. So I see Carol. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. She says she leads the Peacemaker Corps at the United Nations. Tina Flores is here. Hello there. Donna. Hi. Dr. Easterly, hello there. Keith, hi. Thank you so much for always showing up here, Keith. Okay, so whoever wants to chime in the comments, please do let us know you're here. And of course, ask questions along the way too as we go along. If there's something that you want to know, you want to go deeper. All right, Jim, let's hear about you. What's going on with you?
Okay, sounds good. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm getting a little feedback when you guys talk, so I want to make sure I'm coming through clear. Very good.
Oh, I hear you good.
You know, I think you can hear me well? Or
yes,
good?
I do. Yep,
Something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. You know, having been at the bank 32 years, I've seen a number of financial crises. I mean, we had the 87, you know, I'm dating myself, but the 87 stock market crash. I had just started with the bank. Then you had the dot-com, you had 9/11, you had the financial crisis of 2008. But this was very different because for the first time ever, people were genuinely concerned about their well-being. This wasn't just, you know, it turned into a financial crisis, but it started out right away with a lot of different emotions in play. And so this to me was a case where you had to really lead with your heart and your head. You had to have empathy. You had some people very afraid of the virus. You had some people very cavalier about it. I mean, we have a workforce of 3,000 people, much like Don, and you have millennials that, you know, they think they're bomb-proof in life, as do some of us older folks that act like millennials. And then you have others that, you know, were very afraid for good reasons in many cases, pre-existing conditions or living with someone who's more vulnerable at home. So, you know, we immediately took 3,000 employees and had 1,200 working from home, split our headquarters to 4 different locations, split our senior leadership team right away. So with 3,000 employees, I don't mind sharing this, we only had 19 employees test positive for COVID thus far. And I think that's pretty amazing when you consider that to me is a testimony. We did the social distancing. We got after things the way we should have right away. But, you know, then you had a new dynamic you were managing. You had some folks that had to still come into the branch because we run an essential business. You know, we're the plumbing behind all the commerce going on. So when everybody has those Amazon Prime boxes show up at their door and they think, oh, it's safe, someone has to make those payments happen and do things. Some of that you can do from home. Some of it you still have to have access to super secure systems that you can't set up in someone's home for them to do their work. We also had people that had to work the drive-throughs and interact with the public. And so you had this really interesting dynamic in that you had some folks that had to come in. They had to interact with the public, so a different level of risk. You had others that had to come into an office, which that felt different. And then you had those from home, you know, Joann touched on this, that they're managing families at home. And, you know, my favorite is seeing the cameos of some of the kids pop in. Yesterday, we had our audit committee and one of our presidents, her little son, Benny, he leaned around the camera, he saw his head come in, and I texted her in the meeting. I said, hey, nice cameo by Benny. And she said, he just wanted to see my friends. So, and of course I replied, I said, you have friends? This is a different person than the person I know at work. But, you know, we were running an essential business, but you know, everybody working for us had the same fears as everybody in the general public. And, you know, the more you watch the media, I think that made some people feel very differently. So I think it stretched us as leaders in a different way. If you had a heart, it was a great time to show up with it, with empathy, but you had to use your head too, because you were running a business, meeting customers' needs, making sure healthcare workers are being paid, and doing some other essential services. So I think it was a fun challenge. I wish it wouldn't have been a pandemic because frankly, I think our team enjoyed the challenge and the crisis management part of it. So, and I'll talk more later about, there's a little bit of a letdown when you get to where things are starting to return to normal. Now it's like, oh, wow, now we're back to those projects we were working on before, and some are slower and some are faster than we like. So.
That's awesome. So for those who are just joining, I'm joined by Don Davis, the county manager for Jefferson County, Joann Robertson, who is the CEO of Ketchum in London, and then Jim Reuter, who is the CEO for First Bank. And one of the things that you just brought up, Jim, which I think is interesting, this idea of head and heart. And we talk about this, you know, on the show, where I think there's a confusion by many that there's only one way to go. And that when we talk about heart, that you only lead with heart. And I would be this most naive person on this planet if I thought that's how we had to go, or else we would never operate businesses and we'd be in way worse shape than we are even right now, right? With what's going on with the disaster and the crisis that we have. So I think that I agree with you. There's this like balance there. And that book that I'm writing, The Art of Caring Leadership, in which the three of you will show up, it is this idea of like each leader having to kind of use their own strokes. Kind of, there is no bullseye for one particular way to show up, right? And but you have to just kind of, it's like a wave. And so I love that you brought that point up, that I had, it's a great time to show up with heart, but you got to use head. And the reason why you actually show more heart by using your head, because the more that you can kind of, like Dawn talked about, kind of remain resilient, kind of remain unemotional, you help them build resilience and you model it. So the head and the heart combination is a perfect way to look at it. Anybody have any comments on that? What about you, Dawn? Anything that shows up for you?
Yeah, those are spot on. I mean, I think if you let your heart roam wild, you'll make decisions and you'll do things strictly based on feelings and emotion. It's got to be tempered with thoughtful, consideration of all the circumstances going on. It's kind of like the rudder of a ship. If the ship is the heart and the brain is the rudder, it steers. And of course, you talk, you speak, you say things. You can't take those words back. You can't take those feelings. Your tongue expresses all of that emotion and that thoughtfulness, depending on whether you merged it together. One example I can say is, we because we were one of the larger communities in Colorado, we were able to get CARES Act dollars sent straight to us from the federal government. So that meant receiving $101.7 million to help serve the community. Everybody and their brother wants a piece of that pie, and to a certain extent, you've got to balance that. What are the greatest needs? You're balancing between feeding people, to paying for emergency services, to providing for your employees to make sure you don't lay them off. I think we're very fortunate as a county. We talk about leadership and how much you care. We did not furlough or lay anybody off, and our hope is that we won't have to do that. We're going to do our best to work together. I mean, you can talk about that, but then when the situation arises, you need to be able to make those kind of decisions. Your heart tells you one thing, and sometimes but you got to engage both of them. Sometimes, those folks that use all brain and no heart, I mean, we've probably seen those types of leaders too. They're definitely not good, but that balance is extremely important. So I wholeheartedly agree with Jim, and that doesn't just apply in this job, but it applies across the spectrum. And when I was in the military, it was certainly important.
Well, I'd say I think also it's really important that at different points, whether it's just running a business generally, or indeed whether it's when you're in a crisis, the different elements take the lead at different points, right? So when we were first moving everyone to work from home, supporting people, whether it's because they had families at home, whether it's because they're some of our younger employees who are in really cramped shared accommodation, trying to find space to be able to work, to talk to clients. At that point, your heart is 100% leading the way, and how you can really make this as seamless, as painful, as supportive as you possibly can be during that time. But you've quickly got to, at some points, move to your head is in the lead, and you're looking at how can you protect as many jobs as possible through this crisis, and what tough decisions do you have to make as a leader in your business in order to achieve that. And so I think sometimes people think it's this perfect balance that's happening at all times, but I think you have to have that kind of self-awareness to know at what point you need to let your heart rule, and what points you need to put your head firmly in the game and think about the longer term rather than the immediate crisis that you're working in.
I love that. And I remember our conversation on the podcast about that, because your main inclination is to drive for success, drive for
move forward.
Yeah, you are that kind of CEO, and so but to be very thoughtful and contemplative about how you balance, how you show up. This is not a perfect thing. Like I said, it's not science. It's definitely art, right? And but the fact that what I love about this, and this is why I continue to try to highlight you all, is I like for everyone else to see how much thoughtfulness does go into it, right? So that there's not, what often happens, and it happened to me. I mean, I thought about this early on, and even just in the last 10 years when I've reported to people, is often it does seem like there's no thought process. There's not like a rhyme to what's happening, right? And so the more that I can expose other people to see that there are leaders out there who are balancing, the needs of all of the stakeholders that are involved, and are putting quite a bit of heart in that process, and that so that there's good people out there, right? And do we show up as our best every single day? No, but in the end, we have to be reflective on what that looks like. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the screen. Here's one comment from CJ. Proud to be a Jeffco employee, which I thought that's kind of cool, showing up for you. And then here's a question that Donna Louise asked her. It's a big one, so hopefully you can see this. The role of women is impacted differently, and the inequality continues to be an issue. So thank you for contribution on that, Joann. How can we look at gender roles more fairly during this pandemic? The pandemic is gender neutral, and we really need to not put more pressure on women to balance home, school, daycare, remote work experiences, and survival. That's a big question, but I know for sure you, Jim, you're real focused on kind of diversity, inclusion, and those types of issues at First Bank. So I'm just curious to know if you have any initial thoughts, and if not, if someone else would like to chime in. How have you helped, I guess, with that? Or how would you think in the future, if you weren't able to kind of think about that now, how would you help in the future with doing that, with kind of not putting as much pressure and making sure that maybe it applies more equally across the board, the impacts?
Well, I think
Heather, I had a hard time hearing your question.
Did you not hear me?
Go ahead, Joann.
Oh.
Sorry. Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things that I think...
I can now. I was having trouble there.
Okay.
I think one of the things that's really important as we look at business moving forward is, wherever possible, really driving the idea of flexibility within workforces and within working environments, because I think that allowing people, males and females, to be able to flex their work around everything else that's going on in their life. And for some, that's childcare. For some, it's caring for older parents. For others, it might be a side hustle, whatever it might be. I think allowing people to try and have a different type of working experience is really important. But I mean, some of the questions are much bigger than just in the workplace. It's about how society has been built. And so breaking down some of those societal barriers about who's expected to take on the lead role when it comes to childcare or home care is a much, much bigger question. But I think business can actually play a really important role in that. And one of the things we've really tried to do at Ketchum is we have a fully flexible working policy. Now we're lucky that we can do that because we're a consultancy, and so we don't have a requirement for people to be in a branch, for example, or on the front line. They can work from their homes really easily, or work from anywhere really quite easily. But that fully flexible working policy has basically meant that parents of all types have been able to get the job done in any given day around the childcare responsibilities they've had during COVID-19. And our clients, as well as us as Ketchum, have been really understanding to support people to balance their day, to get what they've got to get done for work, but at the same time have their responsibilities at home looked after. And I think within our business, what's great to see is we don't see that male-female divide, particularly when it comes to childcare. But we're certainly seeing it across society, as the Forbes data shows.
That was awesome. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can. I don't know if Jim went. Jim, you were, can you comment now? Because I have some comments too, but I'll go after you.
So, Joann was talking about helping people manage work at home and different things, and juggling all the priorities. And that's something we paid employees 100% if we had branches closed when they were at home. So we tried to make sure that as they were trying to juggle life and manage all the new challenges of working from home, we didn't want them to have to worry about their job and their finances. And also, I'm on the Women's Foundation of Colorado board. And, Joann, you mentioned this earlier, disproportionate impact to women out of COVID-19, whether it be juggling responsibilities at home or even from an unemployment perspective. And so it's something we're very much talking about and working with our employees to make sure they're in a good place. We started a moniker at the start of that. There was the end of every communication that said, "We got this," and the operative word being "we," because it takes not only the company, but it takes the employee and the customers. One of the things I'm really proud of is we did during the crisis is there's is Make for COVID, a company that had a 3D printing operation, and that's when the personal protection gear was very much in short supply for hospitals. So we made a large financial contribution to that company to start making equipment for the hospitals. A customer of ours, Leopold Distilleries, they recalibrated their distillery to make hand sanitizer. And then we obtained donations from other foundations to help support all those efforts, got a plane and flew all the supplies around to hospitals throughout the state of Colorado. So, throughout this crisis, there's been a lot of opportunities to show your heart, not only with your employees, but for your community as well. And one of the things we did early on was define what would success look like at the end of COVID-19. You can get so mired down into what you're managing day to day and the crisis that you lose sight of what the end could be. And you go towards what you focus on. I ski and bike, and if you look at the rock, guess what you'll do? You'll run into that rock. If you look at where you want to go, you'll end up at a different spot. And so I think COVID-19 is the same thing. And so at the beginning of this, we defined what success would look like on the other end, and it would be healthy employees, healthy customers, and a healthy financial institution, and leaning into our banking for good and giving back to the community. And so every time we were making decisions in different things, we would step back and go, is this going to get us to that end goal? Are we making a good decision here if those are our end goals? So I think, one of the things that was very instrumental for me as a leader was staying in touch with my coach. It can get easy when you're in a crisis mode to divert off of what maybe got you to where you are in terms of being effective. And it was even more important to keep that discipline and do those sorts of things. And what came out of that was, what's your goal at the end of COVID-19? So just an interesting angle that I'm not sure a lot of people have thought about early on in this crisis. I'd say 2 weeks in, we were setting goals for success at the end of COVID-19. So.
That's a great idea. I love that, because all of us, there's so many of us have been focused so much on the day to day and just putting out fires and meeting the needs of the people that need us, and which is important. We need that. But we do, I think that's why I have you on here, right? We need to have the leaders who are also continuing to look past it and to reimagine what could be different. And I think one of the things I think is that we should really be seizing the opportunity. I don't want to minimize all of the, the deaths and the things that have happened and the just real unfortunate things that have happened to people around the world. But we need to seize the opportunity to, think of what we actually wanted to happen before COVID that we might as well just go ahead and do now, right? Let's just think through that. And I think if we have people that are looking more forward, thinking with things, and look, like you said, what you focus on, you become, then I think we're going to come out of it a lot stronger than if we just kind of sit and wallow in the current state, right?
Yeah, so those are great comments, and along this lines, the same question. I think diversity is something that appreciate the question specifically about gender, but I think diversity and that conversation needs to occur all the time. Obviously, if you hadn't been and in crisis, it's magnified. I think that's important. For us, we think of diversity as a 3D. It's 3D. You got diversity in demographics, of course, right? That's the most common examination of diversity. But you also have to have an organization that encourages diversity of thought and diversity of action. And so those three things should work together in terms of diversity. We have there's gender issues. There's color issues. This virus is affecting people of color in a much greater way than it is other people. And it's also affecting people who are older. And so, in our employee base, we have people that are not just, gender, but we've got to consider, what about our older folks? What about there are, I think the stats show that men are getting the disease more than women, but how do we address those issues to take care of our people? We've got folks that are on admin leave. They can't, their work can't be done remotely, but they can't show up. And we had a choice. We could either lay them off, or we could keep them on the rolls, and figure it out, try to how to repurpose some of their roles and things like that. And so we've done everything we can to try to keep everybody on the rolls. And to Jim's point about thinking internally and externally, we're doing things internally to take care of our people. We've also got to do things to take care of the communities that were mentioned in the question. Single moms. It's a tough. I saw it in the military. That's one of the toughest, if not the toughest job in the world, is to be a single mom. Especially in the military, you've got to deploy, you've got to go do what everybody else is doing, but you leave your kids behind and you put them in the hands of other family members or other people to take care of them. That's got to be incredibly hard. And so for us, we focus internally, externally, we've provided, $5 million to our local businesses, $30 million to our local cities to take care of the concerns inside their areas, $2.5 million to our nonprofits to help support their efforts again. And they have a huge portfolio of support from women to minorities to children and elderly. And so we're trying to get that out. And then we have another almost $1 million that we've allocated towards food, because food is something that's common to everyone, right? And so it's a common need to all of us. So, but I think, you got to think about diversity all the time. In crisis, it's extremely important. You want to recognize those differences. But if you're doing it before and after, then during the crisis is going to be, it's almost going to be a no-brainer.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting, I love that, because I do think that how we were setting ourselves up beforehand, and then during and after, all of it it has a huge ripple effect on what our businesses will look like, 2-3 years down the road, when it comes to the employees, our retention, when it comes to, citizen happiness, whatever it is we're talking about in these populations that we serve, right? So yeah, it's right now that matters most. So it's not necessarily thinking right now, it's acting right now. And how do we show up right now? Jim, did you want to say something?
Yeah, something I would just add is, the key to diversity is listening. You think you have answers, but we've reached out to our employee base constantly throughout this crisis, asked them what's working, what's not working. And it was very enlightening. There were adjustments we needed to make. And then there's also making sure you do stick to your business as usual and keep moving forward. So a good example is we have a very strict internship program. We bring in about 50 interns every year, and it's very much focused on diversity, because we want more leadership in the banking industry from diverse backgrounds. And we find the internship program to be the best source of those candidates. Most companies cancel their internship programs during all of this because they're going, well, do we really want to bring people into the workforce? We don't know where they're coming. We're like, no, that goes against the mission of where we want to be 3, 5, 7 down the road. So I think, again, a crisis can cause you to take your eye off of your main goals, where you want to be down the road, because it can be so all-consuming. But I think if you remain, that's the head part of leading through this, is going, okay, my heart would right now say, let's react to everything, but my head has to keep us looking on the horizon and where we want to be. But listening is key. As we say, sometimes being in a meeting and doing nothing but listening means you participated appropriately.
Mm.
Yes, Jim, and I know you do that well. I've seen it in action. So, that listening, though, is hard. So the listening part is hard. Even though it helps you drive forward in a more, in a clearer way from the head, listening is hard. So let's not confuse that. Let me just see. Staying in touch. I'm looking at the different comments, and there was one question. It was a long one, but something about, do you think perception about being available 24/7, work from home, like hoping that the remote work concept sticks past COVID, and then also making sure that there's not a negative perception related to those who do still work remotely, and how, what do we do about that? Do we tweak the roles that allow for that? I think that's what you were talking about, Donna Luisa. And if it isn't, just go ahead and chime in the comments to qualify that. So that's, what do you think about it? Because that is a big one. Like, wow, we actually survived through letting a lot of people work remotely. What does that look like? now, when businesses are slowly opening, let's say, if everything's fully open in 2 months or something, what does that look like? And how do we change the perception in our workplaces that employees can get enough done? It's good productivity, but they're not like nonstop, slaves to it.
Well, I think from my perspective, we need to be a bit careful on this, because it feels like a very polarized discussion right now, as if the only choice is either everyone's working in a kind of traditional office environment or everyone's basically working in their own homes. And I think the debate shouldn't be about home working, but it should be about flexibility. So if a organization in a role there is the possibility for that role to be flexible in terms of where it's based and how the person gets the job done, empowering people and treating people like adults to trust that you can give them the focus for their role, the objectives that they need to achieve, and that you as their employer really trust them to get that done in the right way. And that might be sometimes working at home. It might be sometimes, in our business, working from the client's organization. It might be sometimes being in the office and collaborating, being creative. There's so many different ways in which we can work today. So really, I think driving flexibility rather than home working, because I think a lot of people right now, I've seen so many interesting comments from people that say, am I working from home or am I living in my workplace? And I think that's a really interesting psychological question, because to your point, I think because this was thrust upon us in a crisis situation, and because many of us were having to really work obscene hours to write the business, to keep everything focused, to sort out the kind of home working scenario, it has become a bit like we're living in our workplace. And I think for many of us, and I would say this about myself, I want to reclaim my home for what it is. I want my home to be the place in which I relax, I recharge. It's the family space. I hate the fact that my almost 4-year-old will say, am I allowed to come into the office, which is our old dining room. So the kind of boundaries of what your home is for, I think, have been eroded slightly. That's not to say that post this crisis, if I want to work from home, frequently I can. But I think the debate needs to be about how we can drive flexibility, which helps to drive diversity of talent and perspective in your business where you can, if it's role appropriate.
I love that. And some of the comments are, boundaries are there, and basically making sure that the boundaries, or if you do work from home, there's no disadvantage for the career development. And then also, wherever you work, like you were talking about, wherever you work from home, you work from a cafe, you work from your client, whatever it is, that it's not perceived that way. But at the same time, someone mentioned, Amnon, thank you, formal boundaries must be established for working from home. So do you have some examples of that? So that's a good point. Do you three have any examples of, for those who maybe weren't doing it before, were there certain boundaries or certain rules or policies that you put in place? And then how does that work? I mean, obviously the enforcement side. So I'm curious.
So it's interesting because as those folks that are in the military, every time they deploy for 6 months or 12 months or whatever, they pretty much that entire time, they are day on, stay on, nonstop. So it's been an interesting journey for me, because I can go I'm in deployment mode right now, like just 24/7. I'm working longer hours. I'm more productive. I'm used to doing that when I was in the military. You're up until 2-3 o'clock in the morning. If you're not on a convoy, you're following the convoy on a computer, and you don't go to sleep until they all get back inside inside the wire, safe and sound. And then, you can catch about 3 or 4 hours of sleep. You wake up and you start all over again. And you do that for 6 months or a year. Some people do it for 18 months. We're about 10 weeks into this. So, for us, we are going to capitalize on some of this stuff. We're actually, my goal with this, we have clearly seen the silver lining in this is that we've seen that many people can telework. And they're actually more productive at home, and they're more productive teleworking than they were when they were physically in the office, because there's, I guess social interaction is important, but that kind of goes away. I'm not talking to my teammates as much because I'm here by myself. You know, I'm talking to them through the line, but it's usually work related. And we do talk about those types of things. But, you know, my goal after this is over is I'd love to see us at least convert 30% of our jobs into telework jobs. You know, there's easily 1,000 jobs out of the 3,000 that we have that can be accomplished as effectively, more effectively. And in the line of developing that, we are working on things like ergonomics and how do you practice people sit more. We did have an employee that actually had a blood clot. Because they were sitting, you know, they're sitting down, they're not getting up. And so how do we put policies together that encourage people if they're going to telework, because we're going to continue this when we get out of it. And we don't want people teleworking and working themselves to the grind. We want to make sure that they know, hey, ergonomically, you want to make sure you got this. You want to make sure you don't have even trip hazards. You know, you don't want to trip over the dog or over your kids or whatever. You want to have a workspace, but you want to have it set up and you want to set some rules. And so we are working through and identifying the things and the challenges that we see people working too hard or working, you know, doing those things to moderate that. But we also have found that people really do, they're more productive you know, I mean, there's a certain level of happiness that can go with my commute is quick, right? If all I got to do is walk from my bedroom to my office space, I mean, what can be better than that? A 30-second commute, you know? But so we're working through those issues. I think it's a great opportunity for us to take a hold of, especially as we get on the other side of this.
Jim, anything to add on your part?
Yeah, Heather, can I?
Yes.
Yeah, I do. You know, I think one of the key things is that they hear from us as leaders as to what we expect of people working from home. So one of the very first videos that I shot and sent out to all employees addressed empathy towards people adjusting to work from home. But I also gave them encouragement. I'm like, hey, get out of bed, shower, put in your contacts and get ready for work. I mean, you know, the more you can create the boundaries by treating it like you're at work and looking professional, you'll feel better in the end. But this, you know, as a bank, it's a really interesting thing to manage through the pandemic because we're managing many of the same issues as Don and Joann, but then I also look at the financial implications. So we look at, you know, hotel and restaurant, airlines, travel, clearly impacted by this immediately. And when I look at recovery on the other side, some retail, many of those things will come back. You know, shopping, that's actually a hobby for a lot of people. So even though Amazon Prime has done great, people still want to go try things on, have experiences. People still want to eat out. I know people itching to get on airplanes and stay at hotels, but the sector of the business I think that's going to be permanently impacted is office space. And the reason is allowing a different work-life balance. It's cleaning up the environment. I don't know if you guys have looked at the Denver skyline lately, but it's never been more clear. So there's a win out of telecommuting that will promote its existence post-COVID. And I think one of the key things we need to do as leaders is help people set those boundaries, but you also have to figure out how to get your team together and still build that camaraderie. So we very much have encouraged management to have hours or the Zoom get together, done things like, you know, show us the silliest thing you hoarded in advance of COVID-19. My favorite was someone had hoarded or picked up dehydrated goat's milk. And we asked him if he ever even drank goat's milk. No, it just seemed like something I should have in case, I don't know. Or, you know, just take us around your house and show us that home improvement project you have never finished. So, you know, we try to figure out how do we still get the camaraderie. And I actually think we've done some of our best team building in this environment because we've been more intentional about it. We just assume that when we're in the office and we collide, that same thing is happening. So I think it takes, like anything, if you're going to be successful, what's your plan to be successful with that, with the heart and the head? The heart part is show us your family, show us your pets, show us the silliest thing you hoarded. The head part is set, you know, parameters. You're not supposed to work extra hours. If you are more productive at certain times, then let's talk about if that works better for you. So it's a journey, but I think this is the journey out of COVID that will stick permanently. I know people that are itching to get back into a mall and spend their money. And as a banker, I like that. So to be candid. So so it's just interesting. Yeah, Joanne's raising her hand. So.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Oh gosh. Right now there's this, we talk about this reality here. So I'm in my like little home studio, but upstairs I have 4 kids. And so upstairs I hear, yeah, they're just, it's boys. Like they're just running around like, shut up. I had a dog. You could hear her like little, it's just, that's the life. And that's the life I always led, by the way, because I've always been remote, the last few years at least. So, but it's just interesting now because we are, I think I noticed a difference in how people showed up even to these calls. In the first few weeks, people were like, at least I got out of bed, like they had a hat on and they were just like, oh, and now we're like, okay, we probably should appear more professional now, it's like now we're not in ball caps and things like that. So that's been funny. I'm curious to know, what have you been doing to kind of take care of yourself through all this? Because you've had to show up in such a big way. And I do believe in intentionality. And I do think that, self-leadership becomes before leading others. So I'm just curious to know, if there's been anything that you've done. I know there have been. Coffee.
Drink lots of coffee.
Coffee is yours, Don. Jim, have you been rock climbing or anything here? He's stuck on the screen.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you have to take care of yourself as a leader too. We keep talking about how you take care of your employees, but if you don't show up at your best, so stay, exercise. I've stuck with working the coach because there was a Monday I had a call with my coach and she's like, you are not yourself right now. And I was in a little bit of a dip. And by the end of that call, it was the best thing I ever did because I left there fired up, ready to go. So it's just, we keep talking about how to take care of employees. If you don't take care of yourselves as leaders during this, you won't show up your best either. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think I've really tried to maintain my routine as much as I possibly can. So, I usually see a personal trainer 3 times a week. I'm doing that virtually in my garden, which has been really good for my kind of mental and physical health. But yeah, just trying to maintain my usual routine as much as possible. And much like Jim just said, talking to people who are in your close team that you really rely on and listen to. Because I had the same thing a few weeks ago where someone close to me gave me a call and said, you're low energy, you seem really pessimistic, are you taking care of yourself, and really talked me around, because I think I'd done the same. I'd kind of, everything had been up here and I'd come down and I'd kind of reached the bottom. Energy reserves were low, my resilience was wavering, and it was great to have someone be able to say to me, that I'm coachable enough and open enough that someone in my team could say to me, right, pull yourself together, have a think about what you need to do to kind of replenish your own reserves. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I think on the military side of the house and in general, you've got mind, body, and spirit. Napoleon said that the moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1. And what he meant by that was when his army was spiritually fit, they were 3 times more capable. In the middle of that mind, body, and spirit, there's a emotional quotient. And if you're balanced, nobody would sit on a 3-legged stool that's strong 2 legs and with 1 weak leg, right? So mentally, physically, and spiritually, you have to be balanced and you have to maintain that balance. I can tell you that it's been a struggle at times, right? The mind is incredibly active right now and off the charts. It's almost hard to go to sleep at night sometimes so how do you unplug so that you can go to sleep and get back up and do it all over again? But then you need to have that routine so you're exercising your body physically, which is a little hard when you're quarantined, but you can get out and walk. And Jefferson County parks, we have 57,000 acres of open space and parks in Jefferson County, and we have seen record attendance, right? So your people are getting out and exercising, but there's a spiritual part. And when churches can't meet and whatever your spiritual choices are, even faith in nothing is faith in something. So it's important to explore and ask those questions. Why am I here? What's my purpose in life? Why do I do those things that I do? Because you need to understand that part of you and to explore that and grow that and nurture it, right? You got to have a hope, and hope comes from more than just mind and body. It comes from that spiritual aspect of who we are. And so, I have found that it's hardest sometimes to really make sure that you're taking care of your spirit and the spirit of others in this, and encouraging them to, to grow and reflect and do those types of things they need to do to maintain this level of performance.
I love it. There's one last question, and then I'll wrap it up.
Heather, can I?
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Can I add something in there, Heather?
Yes.
I use the analogy when you're on an airplane and they say, put on your oxygen mask before assisting someone else. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good rule to live by. But also, the seeds of what you plant outside of a crisis are what you reap in a crisis. And one of the things we embarked on 2-3 years ago was a project where we really focused on renewal. We were a company, and we still are. I mean, I think we're hard charging. Everybody thinks they're that. But I think if you spent much time with our team, you'd be like, whoa, you guys don't need caffeine or Starbucks. You're good to go. But we weren't great at renewal, and we can show it. And so one of the things that I think really helped us is building that culture. So during the middle of the crisis, at least 3-4 times on a Friday, I would say, hey, this weekend, pencils down. This is a renewal weekend. All I had to do was say renewal, and people knew what that meant. And it's like a muscle. We had exercised enough in advance of the crisis that it was you could automatically make it happen when you needed. I mean, we had crews working 24 hours a day for 10 weeks or 10 days, not the same people, but shifts, because we did 12,000 SBA PPP loans in 10 days. We don't do 12,000 loans in a year typically, and we do 12,000 in 10 days. And so talk about the importance of renewal and taking care of the team, but they don't see you do it. They will not do it. So it was not that long ago, I took a day off and didn't check email. And, people thought I was in the ICU from another bike crash or something, but I really was just leading by example and not checking my email. So, but it's what you practice pre-crisis that you're good at in a crisis. And Don can probably speak to that more than anybody in the military. You create muscle memory for the things you need to be good at. And this is a good time to do. We did a post-COVID-19 meeting and said, what can we learn from this? We can put it into our leadership going forward. Because there's the silver lining of COVID is it's a real test for your team. And it's a lot of great things you want to celebrate and a lot of great things you want to make sure you do next time. But there's also opportunities for growth, and we've built that list and we're working on it right now. So
it's great.
That's exactly what we need to be doing. There's, questions in here about how to, recognize people during COVID. There's, just so you know, to Don, you have a couple of your brethren in here, Dr. Thomas Easterly. He was in the military. I think Amnon. There were a couple people that were saying, thanks for your service. So, I always want to take the opportunity to do that because I'm standing right here because of, what other people did for me through the service they gave. So just want to make sure I recognize that. Okay. So, here's the thing. It's exactly what you said, Jim. I think that something to remember when we think about caring leadership or leadership at heart is it's the work that we put in over the years that prepares us also to be able to, for example, provide feedback and course correct team members when maybe they're going off the path. And so we show our care, our love, our heart when we help them back on the path, but we aren't able to do that unless we have done all the hard work up front. We've invested and we've put the money in their account, right? To make sure that we can be in a place where we can set the mark that way. So right now, right here, we need to seize the opportunity, every single one of us, to show up as our best self, to know that if we put in the work, that we can do the hard work for the team and that the team will be with us. So the last thing I'd like for you to do, just one last maybe minute or two, just tell us, is there some kind of word, positive word just for those who are out there? And there's some here that are leaders or managers, and there's some who are not. But is there any positive, word that you'd like to leave them with before we get off the live show?
I'll go ahead and go first because I got a word. My number one word would in this crisis and in general is humility. C.S. Lewis said that humility isn't thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less. And if we lived in a community where everyone had humility as their number one word and they lifted everyone else above themselves, we would live in an incredible world. We'd be able to take care of one another. Unfortunately, humility is in America has got a dirty name. If you say things like humility or meekness or anything like that, those are almost frowned upon because it's you want to be proud. I was a part of the few, the proud, but how much more strength would it require to be a part of the few, the humble? And so I think if we're humble, then we know we need to. I have no problem with wearing a facial covering. Do I like it personally? No. Do I want it on my face? No. But will I do it so that I can take care of others, so that I'm not sharing whatever germs I have with other people? Absolutely. Am I willing to stay in my apartment or to sacrifice some of my personal freedom so that we can save lives? Absolutely. It's just interesting to see some of the folks really struggling with that and talking about their rights and all these things. A lot of those folks are not the folks that have ever experienced a deployment or defending their country or making those kind of sacrifices. I mean, I hardly think staying in my house for 10 weeks is an incredible sacrifice. We have over 100,000 men and women that have died in our country. That's almost twice as much that died in the Vietnam War from 1954 to 1970 or 52 to 74. That's incredible. I mean, and it just seems like we've downplayed some of that loss of life, and we're still at the front end of this. There's a long way to go, and we need to be willing to be humble and sacrifice for one another, and do it with a joyful heart. So humility for me is the number one word.
Thank you.
And I jump and build on that, because I think for me the word is community, and I think they go really nicely together, because I think what has been for me wonderful to see, particularly in the UK where we've had years of division over Brexit and real left-right political divides that have torn families apart, over the last 12 weeks, it feels like, and I hope that it continues, that there's been a bit of a coming together as a community at our country level, of that whole point about what we're willing to do, what we're willing to sacrifice. And I totally agree with you, John. For the vast majority of it, it's not that hard to stay in your home and put a mask on when you go to the grocery store. And so I think for me, if we can come out of COVID-19 with community at the heart of everything we do, in our businesses, in our local communities, in our countries, and in the world, where we're just kind and we really understand people's differences and points of views and show a kindness and a community around that, I think the world will be a much nicer place to live and do work.
Jim?
My word is calm. Don said it earlier, and there's a lot of people had a lot of emotions running high at different times, and it continues. Now we have issues such as, we require masks of our employees and different things. We had a couple of customers and engage with each other in a not so nice banter with each other on one was wearing a mask and one was not. And so calm will continue to be a really important leadership approach going forward. People take their cues from us as leaders. And if we're calm in the face of a crisis or a storm, it's going to allow others to find peace and calm. And make your best decision when you slow things down. I always say, go fast, go slow, and you'll be faster on the other side. So I think calm is the word I would bring.
And on that note, I want to thank all of you, Don, Joann, and Jim, for giving up your time to, share all of this loveliness with everyone. I'm sure they've learned a lot. I know I have. And I just want to thank you for fighting the good fight and for showing up as your best selves whenever you can, doing the hard work to get there. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Heather.
It's been great,
Bye.
everyone.